In November 2020, the Beyond Light expansion blew up the Destiny 2 universe. Not only did we lose about half of the destinations, but it also sunset the majority of our weapons. These can no longer be infused to the maximum power level, which makes them a poor choice for Trials of Osiris or other endgame content. Still, you can enjoy your sunset gear in the casual 6v6 or survival playlist, and some of it's still extremely good. Today, we'll be taking a look at some of the most unique, stylish, and memorable sunset weapons on a nostalgic journey through the history of Destiny 2. If you find any of these in your vault, make sure to give them a try. I promise you're gonna have a fun time. This wouldn't be a Pattycakes video if we didn't start out with my favorite sniper in Destiny history, the Beloved. It was released during the season of Opulence, and when paired with some favorite hand cannons of the time like the Dire Promise or Spare Rations, it would make for one of the most devastating weapon combos in the hands of a skilled player. Beloved had a beautifully clean 40 zoom scope, over-the-top stats, extremely high bullet magnetism, and it was very resilient against flinch. I think if it weren't for the mountaintop being as busted as it was, Beloved would have been a clear meta outlier for the longest of times. It was just so easy to one-shot kill your enemy at basically any range that your opponent really couldn't do much about it. In the higher end games, players learned to just never peek a sniper lane because they knew that basically everyone on the enemy team had near aimbot quality accuracy with the weapon. And in casual game modes, Beloved was excellent for getting those sweet montages. While we're talking about problematic sniper rifles, let's not forget about the pinnacle reward sniper called the Revoker. Unfortunately, this one didn't come with quite as crazy handling as the Beloved, but it had a clean low zoom scope, an incredible range stat, and seemingly extreme resilience to flinch. What Beloved didn't have though was Revoker's pinnacle perk, Reversal of Fortune. This one literally gave you infinite ammo until you landed a hit. Does that sound problematic to you? How did no one at Bungie think this would be overpowered? After each whiff, you could just wait a moment and then the bullet would go right back into the magazine. You didn't even need to reload. This created a meta of players taking pot shots over and over again until one finally landed. Not exactly the most balanced weapon ever created. One of the craziest, most busted builds combined the pre-nerf Sanguine Alchemy on Warlock with the Middle Tree Dawnblade. The Empowering Rift would make the Revoker body shot anyone with low resilience, and the Sanguine Alchemy would give you literal wall hacks while you're sitting in your rift. When I think about it, maybe cheaters weren't actually a problem in Destiny until recently, because basically everyone already had access to free cheats with this setup. Before we get into the next weapon on the list, I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video who's helping me afford my amazing editing team, NordVPN. At the start of every year, it's helpful to think about what areas you might want to step up your game. And with the world being a scary place sometimes, one of those areas you might want to think about is your internet security. It's becoming more important than ever these days thanks to some sketchy characters out there. With people starting to get out a little bit more and using public Wi-Fi, you really need to be careful. If you're connecting to public Wi-Fi in a coffee shop, the airport, or pretty much anywhere with free internet, your data can be at risk, but a solid VPN will have your back. I've been recommending using a VPN to friends for years now, and NordVPN is the most reliable and fastest option out there. It has an automatic kill switch, so if your VPN connection accidentally drops off for a second, it will automatically block your device from the web until it gets reconnected. If you're like me and you still never really leave the house that much these days, well, Nord can help you out here too. A lot of online content is region locked by country, but with a single click of a button, you can be instantly relocated digitally to countries all over the world and able to watch that content. If this sounds like a pretty good deal, then NordVPN has a special offer for you to start off the new year. Go to nordvpn.com/pattycakes or use code pattycakes to get a 2-year plan with 1 additional month at a huge discount. Protect your online privacy with NordVPN. And once again, a big thanks for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back into it. Did you know that Bungie converted one of my favorite pulse rifles in all of Destiny 2 into a fire-breathing dragon? Well, I guess maybe a fire-breathing wolf anyway. Claws of the Wolf was a rapid-fire pulse rifle from the Iron Banner that could roll with a particularly devastating perk, Kill Clip. We don't see Kill Clip available on rapid-fire pulses too often these days, which is a shame because that bonus damage allows you to kill an enemy in just 2 bursts at 540 RPM. It's wildly powerful once you get it going. Out of all the pulses in Destiny, I just loved how this one felt. The sight is awesome, the rate of fire helps you win fights even in very close ranges, and it could dominate in the mid-range. I hope someday we get another rapid fire pulse with access to Kill Clip. Maybe if they bring back the good old Clever Dragon from Destiny 1. In the Bungie 30th anniversary event, we recently got Luna added back into the game. This was perhaps the most famous legendary hand cannon from Destiny 1. It was an absolute fan favorite, and it definitely was my own personal favorite legendary in D1. But did you know that Bungie had already given us a cousin to Luna just a few years ago? During the Menagerie season, we got the Austringer. This was a 140 RPM hand cannon that could roll an insane perk combination, Eye of the Storm and Opening Shot. With this combo, your first shot in a fight was nearly guaranteed as a headshot thanks to the range and accuracy provided by Opening Shot. Then as your health got lower in a duel, you automatically would proc Eye of the Storm, which would give you accuracy and handling. With Eye of the Storm active, it became almost hard to miss, and the extra handling helped out a ton when quickly switching to your shotgun up close. Even with the Luna added back into Destiny with some great perks and stats, I still feel like its cousin the Austringer was the slightly better hand cannon overall. I just love the look and feel of this gun, and I don't plan on dismantling my own role anytime soon. Hold tight, I'm going to use two illegal words in the Destiny 2 community, skill and bow. These things just don't mix, right? I mean, look at that aim assist. Well, I'm gonna say it, this bow was one of the highest skill, highest reward weapons in the game. I'm talking about the Gambit pinnacle bow known as Hush. Hear me out, I promise I'm not going crazy. You know how the main problem with using a bow is the fact that you need to wait out that lengthy draw time? That's why bow players usually hug the corner of a map and try to tag the enemy from really far away. You can pre-draw the first shot, but what happens after you let that arrow fly? You either need to perform another lengthy draw animation or swap to a different weapon. With the Hush, you could get a massive draw speed boost for a couple seconds if you landed your hipfire headshot. This was much harder than landing a normal headshot while aiming down sights, but it would also reward you by turning your bow into a high-powered scout rifle. Just watch how my friend Walla brutally murders everyone in this Rumble lobby using the Hush. He's one of the best players in Destiny 2, and you can immediately see how incredibly powerful the Hush can be in skilled hands. I'm kinda sad to see this one gone. I wish we had more high skill, high reward weapons in Destiny 2. And while we're talking about skill and reward, I just can't forget to mention the infamous hand cannon duo of Luna's Howl and Not Forgotten. I'm sure most of the veteran players have had their fair share of both joy and rage when it comes to these beastly hand cannons, but newer players might not know the backstory. If you've never played with the Not Forgotten, please go to the kiosk in the tower and buy yourself a copy of this infamous hand cannon. I know it's sunset, but trust me, it's a fine addition to your vault. Immediately after you fire your first shot of the Not Forgotten, you'll see, well, something's kinda wrong. This gun shoots at 140 RPM, it deals your average 70 damage for a headshot and 47 body shot damage, but it doesn't have any recoil. Well, it's actually a precision frame, even though those things normally come with a rate of fire of 180 RPM. But it wasn't always this way. Not Forgotten and its baby brother the Luna's Howl actually used to be 180 RPM hand cannons, but with a very unique pinnacle perk. Magnificent Howl would count your blessings, I mean your headshots, and whenever you collected 2 consecutive headshots, it would massively, and I mean massively, amp up the damage. You'd start hitting your opponent for 131 damage per headshot. But you had to be really careful as this damage boost would go away the second you missed or when you killed your opponent. If you took your shots precisely and you resisted the urge to spam away at your opponent, you could consistently achieve a 2 headshot and 1 body shot kill in that order. Pulling this off would eliminate your opponent in 0.67 seconds. If you read between the lines, you'd notice that Magnificent Howl didn't deactivate if you landed 2 headshots on one opponent and then transfer that damage over to a second player. And this way, you could 2-tap your opponent at 180 RPM for a blazing fast 0.33 second kill time. This was crazy. In today's meta, to achieve a similar kill time of 0.67 seconds, you'd have to land a 2 burst with a 340 RPM pulse rifle like the Messenger, or hit all headshots with something like the Multi-Mock or Borrowed Time. And the Not Forgotten's 2-tap time to kill was saved only for the insane damage output of weapons like the Terraba's Ravenous Beast. Hand cannons are much easier to use accurately than most of these, which is why Bungie decided Magnificent Howl just had to be nerfed. These hand cannons were converted first to 150 RPM and then now to 140. So they can still 3-tap, albeit much slower, and Magnificent Howl was changed to only buff the body shot damage. So you can still get your 2 headshot and 1 body shot kill from quite far away, but the days of the 131 damage headshots have passed. Although Not Forgotten and Luna's Howl are a shell of their former glory, the forgiveness of only needing to land 2 headshots and a body shot is desirable, and they've maintained that precision frame recoil pattern which some players do enjoy quite a bit. Let's swing over to the kinetic slot and take a look at one of the most infamous and hard to acquire hand cannons in Destiny 2's history, the Spare Rations. If you weren't around for the Spare Benders meta, you've missed one of the most iconic periods in Destiny 2's history. It's not much of a surprise that Spare Rations was an immediate favorite in the community. Its perk pool was filled with lots of very strong options. You could reach 100 aim assists with the help of a hand cannon targeting mod. It had a perfectly vertical 100 recoil direction, it belonged to the most popular 150 RPM lightweight archetype, and it had one of the most open sight aesthetics in the game. Oh, and it had incredible range too. With Rangefinder, it could match the range of Ace of Spades, which was quite rare for the era. The lightweight frame would often be paired with the Stompy Hunter exotic boots and with the Mindbender's Ambition shotgun. This loadout was notoriously strong, and I'm gonna say it was really easy to use. And also a lot of fun, but maybe not so much for the other team. Oftentimes, the Spare Rations would also be paired with a totally fair and balanced beloved sniper rifle, but some players weren't happy with just a headshot. These guys wanted more than just an instant one-shot kill at any range. These people wanted style. So they reached for the Tatara Gaze high impact sniper rifle. It was a truly stylish sniper from the Black Armory expansion. This bad boy came with a unique scope, a bit higher zoom, a high damage model, and most importantly, the unique perk Kill Clip. This allowed Tatara's Gaze to one-shot body shot your opponents after getting a kill in a reload. Some players learned to master the moderately high 50 zoom level, and they were rewarded with the potential to kill a guardian just by clipping their toenails. If you want to reproduce something like this with a non-sunset weapon, you should try out the Frozen Orbit. My friend here looked out with probably a 5 out of 5 roll. The 50 handling together with 3 stacks of surplus is just enough to reach a snapshot like aim down sight speed. Surplus would also help you reload faster after getting that initial kill, so you can get your body shot kills even faster. But let's not forget about the long walk. I know there's no kill clip in sight here, but there are these boots for Titan. After getting 2 kills with the long walk, you'll get the Firewalker activated for 10 seconds, allowing you to body shot low resilience guardians. Speaking of Black Armory weapons, how could I not mention probably the most unique non-pinnacle hand cannon, the Kindled Orchid. Many of you probably know that the Kindled Orchid could roll 2 damage perks. You could get Rampage and Kill Clip at the same time, meaning that you could 2-tap your opponents after a single kill. Admittedly, this was pretty difficult to pull off as you needed to reload quickly after the kill and then immediately acquire that next target before Rampage wore off. But what if I told you this was maybe not the most overpowered roll on the Kindled Orchid? If you wanted to win in trials in a very degenerate way, what you see here is the roll that you should have been farming for. Remember the Revoker? Yeah, that sniper rifle with infinite ammo? Well, back in the day, arguably the best way to use the Kindled Orchid was to clean up a Revoker body shot. For that purpose, actually the best possible roll on the Kindled Orchid was the combination of quick draw and explosive payload. Against low resilience players, you can finish a body shot from the Revoker with just one more body shot from the Kindled Orchid and theoretically have infinite range. I'm not joking, this was potentially the most degenerate way to use a hand cannon in the energy slot. Here's my friend Pattycakes using a quick draw explosive kindled on his first ever flawless card in Destiny 2. Also, let's not forget that the Kindled Orchid was actually the longest range 140 RPM hand cannon in the game all the way until Beyond Light. With max range, rangefinder, and explosive payload or rapid hit, Kindled even beat out weapons like the Ace of Spades. Not many people were willing to grind out a 5 out of 5 Kindled though. It's quite a pity though, as it was an awesome gun that got way too little recognition. While we're on the train of Black Armory weapons, how can I forget the legendary, well I guess pun intended, Blast Furnace, the king of dad rifles. Blast Furnace was an aggressive 4-burst 450 RPM pulse rifle which could output some heavy damage from ridiculous range. You might have forgotten, but pulse rifles actually got their range significantly nerfed a while back. Still, you can lane with them just fine, but they're nowhere near as rangy as scout rifles. But this wasn't always the case. The Blast Furnace could reach about 58 meters of range with a low zoom scope. That's crazy. Nowadays you would need something like the Legal Action with a really high zoom scope to even scratch the 50 meter mark. Of course, you could also get the high zoom scopes and absolutely max out the range on the Blast Furnace to push it well above 60 meters. With elite rolls like Quick Draw and Kill Clip, players had access to both lethality and snappiness on a pulse rifle. It was able to hold its own in duels and help tremendously in team engagements with that high burst damage output over range. While we're talking about dad rifles, you know I just gotta talk about the kinetic pulse rifle from Gambit, the Bygones. But this one might not be reserved only for the dads out there in the audience. So check this out. Of course, there's the classic roll of Outlaw and Kill Clip, but for me, what made Bygones so special is that it could roll with Slide Shot combined with either Rampage or High Impact reserves. Many players didn't go for this roll, and I guess they were probably blinded by the meta of Outlaw plus a damage perk. But in reality, with Slide Shot, you could permanently keep your magazine filled just by sliding around, while racking up more and more Rampage stacks and 2-bursting your opponents. Skilled players, yes not only dads, could exploit this gun to go on some crazy aggressive killing sprees. I guess the Bygones also has a particular high sentimental value for me personally, because in the intro of one of my most successful videos ever, which I titled the #1 thing that separates top FPS players from the rest, there's me using this exact roll. It's one of my favorite rolls in all of Destiny. Continuing with pulse rifles, here's one that was definitely designed for a very skilled player, the Redrix's Broadsword, or its predecessor, the Redrix's Claymore. The Claymore was one of the most intense grinds of any weapon in Destiny history. It required you to reach 2100 glory in the competitive playlist, which may seem like a walk in the park by today's standards, but back in Season 3, this was no easy feat. Losses would stack up in streaks, causing you to drop extra points on every consecutive loss. Wins awarded way less points than they do today, and a win streak auto-reset at 5. So for many players, reaching 2100 required an entire season of brutally competitive PvP games. To add salt on the wound, the next season Bungie added the Redrix Broadsword, which was an even better version of the Claymore that could now slot weapon mods. It still featured the unique perk Desperado that made the Redrix so desirable, and it could be completed just by finishing a lengthy quest. This was a tough pill to swallow for players who grinded for the original Claymore since it was promised as an uber exclusive reward. But on the bright side, players who still have the original Claymore as a trophy weapon can rejoice as their prized possession is owned by less than 1% of the player base according to Light.gg. In present day Destiny, the 340 round per minute legendary pulse rifles are one of the strongest pulse archetypes in PvP due to their sheer burst damage output and their very attractive optimal and body shot time to kill. But little did you know, this wasn't always the case. Currently, these need 5 headshots and 1 body shot to kill your opponent, but in the past you needed to land all 6 headshots to secure the kill. Unless you're brand new to the game or sleeping under a rock for all of this time, you should probably know that the Messenger Pulse Rifle has access to Desperado, the pinnacle perk of the former Redrix Broadsword. But this is not where the story of the Redrix ends, or well I guess starts. Back when 6 headshots were required, the Redrix was actually a pretty tough weapon to use. It had a very high skill requirement, but the Redrix met this high requirement with a very high reward. Desperado actually used to be tied to Outlaw, the other perk on the Redrix. Whenever you reloaded while Outlaw was active, you would refresh Desperado. This meant that you could extend the perk for much longer. And while the 6 headshot requirement was extreme, many pioneers of the pulse rifle playstyle accepted the challenge and they were rewarded with a team-destroying melt machine. This playstyle never really went away, and the Redrix Air lives on today, and it's more than just Desperado on the Messenger. But I'm going to talk about that more in a future video near the start of February, so make sure to subscribe, you won't regret it. Okay, enough with the pulse rifles, let's talk about some other weapons. We've already covered the spare rations, one of the best kinetic hand cannons for a long time now, which came from the Reckoning activity. Usually spare rations is paired with the Mindbender's Ambition shotgun, contributing to one of the most infamous metas in Destiny history, the Sparebender's meta. Now, not everyone was thrilled about the idea of sticking to only a shotgun. In Season of the Drifter, back before Beloved was released, one of the best energy snipers to pair with the spare rations was the Soul Survivor, conveniently also from the Reckoning. It could roll the famous combo of Snapshot and Opening Shot for some crazy magnetism and easy headshots. Also, a really unique perk on the Soul Survivor was Ricochet rounds. While you might have the small stability bump at the forefront of your mind, I want you to pay attention to the incredible utility of actually being able to snipe people from behind walls. This was no joke, especially with the abundance of special ammo prior to the Scavenger Bot nerf. Also, back in the day, the low zoom snipers dominated the Crucible, as they allowed you to keep a much wider field of view while aiming at your opponents, and the Soul Survivor had the classic 40 zoom scope, which was also later shared with Beloved. These days, Bungie imposes some heavy aim assist penalties on the low zoom snipers, making them a bit less attractive. Unfortunately, your only current options for 40 zoom snipers belong to the rapid fire archetype, which is underwhelming in many ways. Not only is their body shot damage very low, but there are legitimate damage resistance combos which can let players straight up survive a headshot from a rapid fire sniper. Landing that headshot and having your opponent walk away is a really bad feeling. Unfortunately, I feel that the Soul Survivor was quite underrepresented in the meta. The reason for that is probably the ridiculously low drop rate from the Reckoning, but this doesn't diminish its strength. It still feels pretty good in the modern sandbox. Perhaps the best SMG in all of Destiny 2 is also currently sunset, the Hero's Burden. This was another reward from the Iron Banner playlist. It fires at 900 RPM similar to the Multi-Mach, but it featured the adaptive frame instead of the lightweight frame. This is a big deal because adaptives offer much higher body shot damage, which is great on SMGs since you're probably not going to land exclusively headshots in most of your duels. The increased body shot damage makes adaptive frame SMGs desirable in theory, but the Hero's Burden also has some special tricks up its sleeve to really take it to the next level. With the right roll, it could get up to 17 zoom and 77 range, which meant that it could compete with the highest range SMGs in the game. And it could also do this without sacrificing kill clip as a perk. The end result was one of the best dueling SMGs in the game that could almost step into hand cannon range, but with even more lethality. It's one of my favorite weapons to use in quick play whenever I feel like using a more aggressive style of gameplay. Unfortunately, Bungie doesn't seem to want to add any more adaptive frame SMGs into the game now, and perhaps that's best for balance sake. If you have a nice roll in the Hero's Burden in your vault though, give it a spin because I think you'll really enjoy it. Ah yes, the Mindbender's Ambition. I'm not sure whether I'm happy to be honoring this shotgun or I feel a little bit guilty for bringing back some of the old nightmares. The Mindbenders had a beautiful shotgun aesthetic. It had a satisfying sound and it would actually begin to glow after a kill. It was the predecessor to the infamous Felwinch's Lie, an aggressive frame shotgun which could roll with the elite shotgun perk Quick Draw. For even more handling and sanity, you could pair Quick Draw with the animation speed buff provided by Threat Detector, and yes, this does stack over the 100 handling cap. And if you wanted to cook up a devastating and easy PvP loadout, just blend the Mindbender's Ambition with the Spare Ration's potential 100 aim assist and 100 recoil direction, add a little bit of Stompy's action from the movement skill gap aisle, and season it with some free damage resistance during a dodge from the Bottom Tree Arc Strider. Unfortunately, this wasn't nearly as easy to get as the Felwinters. You had to grind high difficulty versions of the Fanatic Nightfall to even get one to drop, and then you'd have to pray to get the right perks. A lesser known variant of the Mindbenders is actually the curated form. Sure, it was a bit worse in the handling department, but the pre-nerf opening shot on a pellet shotgun could absolutely map your opponent from nearly 10 meters. For reference, a 5 out of 5 perfect god roll time loss pound verdict today can barely scratch the 7.5 meter mark. The handling wasn't so bad either, because back then you could also use the quick swap animation glitch to basically override the worst handling stat. Whichever way you went with it, the Mindbenders was an incredibly good shotgun, and it also evaded the quick draw to surplus conversion that hit Fellwinter's in the Astral Horizon. So if you want an aggressive frame shotgun that still has quick draw, Mindbenders is your best bet. The Parcel of Stardust is one of the biggest casualties of Bungie's gear retirement system. This one was a lightweight shotgun with access to some elite perks like Threat Detector, Opening Shot, Moving Target, and many more. Originally, it dropped from Gambit, so in other words, it was basically unattainable to the average mentally sane player. But the Menagerie activity later saved the day, presenting a way to grind for it specifically so you could get whatever roll you wanted with enough attempts and a little bit of luck. Unfortunately, its bigger brother from the energy slot belonged to the much more favorable archetype. This left Parcel in a nasty situation. It had an awesome intrinsic perk, but a very bad one-hit kill range relatively speaking. Though if they would have let Parcel evade the Great Sunsetting event, today it would probably be one of the best shotguns in the kinetic slot. You see, today the aggressive frames don't kill from nearly as far away as they used to before, and many players have actually shifted towards using the superior movement speed, handling, and rate of fire of the lightweight frames. I'm not sure if Parcel would beat the Wastelander from Dares of Eternity, but you bet it would be a close call. Both of these are amazing shotguns. Speaking of hard to attain weapons, how can I forget the incredibly rare Antiope-D, which formerly dropped from the Gunsmith and exclusively from the Gunsmith. Its rolls feature the elite damage perk Kill Clip, as well as some crazy high range stats combined with a very high zoom level. This made god rolls of the Antiope effective up to auto rifle ranges, making it a true menace in both close and medium range engagements. Again, I feel like we were so blinded by shotguns that we missed the true gems of Destiny 2 sandbox. I guess the Antiope lives on as a permanent reminder that we should never discount the non-mainstream options. I'm really sad that the Antiope was gated behind such a steep wall of RNG. Later, back in the Black Armory expansion, players could get a similar SMG as a random drop after any Forge run, the Atalanta-D. While it had slightly less range, it still came with that all-important high zoom scope, meaning that it was a close second to the Antiope. And it also came with a suppressor for that extra tactical cool factor. Speaking of random post-forge drops gated behind some crazy RNG walls, there's the Galliard auto rifle. Out of every god roll that I'm salty about never receiving, this might be my number one. Auto rifles were rarely at the forefront of the Destiny 2 meta. Kill times in Destiny 2 are usually on the longer side, meaning that you need to track your opponent's head for a substantial 0.8 seconds to get the kill. This is why hand cannons were just so much better, because they could deliver that same damage but in 3 very short bursts, allowing you to take cover between your shots. However, this whole theory was flipped upside down in the Season of the Worthy when the 600 RPM auto rifles were substantially buffed to kill in just 0.7 seconds. Suddenly, options like the newly added Summoner and Gnawing Hunger rose to the top of the meta. The Galliard suddenly became very desirable as it had access to both amazing rolls and the higher zoom scopes, letting it compete with even long-range pulse rifles. I don't know how to feel about the Galliard. I always wanted to have a good roll and I just never got one. I can't even tell you how many hours I spent in those damn forges waiting for one to magically drop with a god roll. After practicing my tracking game for so many hours in aim trainers like Kovacs, I'm always excited to try out my newfound skills in Destiny, and the Galliard would have certainly been a great way to capitalize on those tracking skills. But then there's also a part of me thinking that even if I did get it, I would probably delete it considering how crammed our vaults tend to get. I really wish that Bungie would increase our vault size. That would allow us to keep some off-meta rolls just in case they ever get buffed in the future. I cringe when I think about every god roll that I've had to delete just to make room for some new stuff. Let's finish this list off with a heavy weapon, a very iconic one. Swinging back to the Black Armory for one more gun, the Hammerhead was our first legendary machine gun for the heavy slot in Destiny 2. The 450 RPM heavy machine guns offer a very good and lenient kill time, and they pick up enough ammo to get multiple consecutive kills. It was honestly possible to win rumble matches where you could basically go around stealing heavy ammo the whole time and get more heavy kills than primary kills. The Hammerhead also got some awesome perks like Rampage and Quick Draw to make it snappy and lethal. The clean scope, which also highlighted your targets, made landing headshots very easy. For me, if my exotic slot was already taken, this became basically the default pick for the heavy slot. Nowadays, the commemoration from the Deep Stone Crypt is basically the successor, but something about that sleek design of the Hammerhead makes me feel nostalgic. The moment that Bungie introduced sunsetting was painful for me. Having to let go of my favorite weapons that I love so much just felt wrong, but I guess it was a necessary evil for the well-being of the game. I mean, Revoker was just so busted. I'm glad to not face that thing in trials every weekend anymore. In any case, let me know what weapons you'd add to this list. Which weapons do you miss the most? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't yet, and next up, check out my video on the 37 weapons that define the Destiny 2 PvP meta. It's the one on the top of your screen and also linked in the description.